the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Tax day. That's right, pushed off a little bit. Got an extra little over a month to get the whole tax situation all put into place. Tax the rich day. One of those things, again, my whole life divided on are taxes good or taxes bad. I think taxes are the price of admission. You want to live in this country, we want to live in a place that has roads and bridges and schools and police departments and fire departments and a military that we use way too much. If that's your goal, you got to pay taxes. If you want to live on a dirt lot where every time you go off of your dirt lot, you're reaching into your pocket, then don't have a tax base. It seems that simple. Now, interesting, I had this weird conversation today, and it got my mind going back into this division of where we are. Because someone brought up to me, they go, well, we pay way too much taxes. We're taxed higher than anyone in the history of the world. And I had to stop for a second, and I asked, are you serious? Is that something you believe? And this person clearly had bought the Tea Party ideal of, hey, we're just taxed beyond recognition. There's no possible way that we could possibly ever pay higher taxes. And I said, the reality is our grandparents' generation paid considerably higher taxes at every step of the way. And you go back to the 1950s, top marginal tax rate 92%. But also the guy at the bottom was paying more too. And it went up I think it was like every $2,000 the tax rate went up. So the more that you earned, the more that you paid in taxes. Incrementally went all the way up to 92%. And it got me into this conversation because he says to me, he goes, well, we just see things differently. And I'm going, no, we don't see this differently. This is a fact. This is provable. This is a provable fact. And it got me into this mindset of how is it in this day and age when we carry around with us this instrument that gives us unlimited information. We have never had such ease of information. The Library of Congress is in our pocket as we're walking around. We have access to every bit of human intelligence possible, and yet somehow we choose to pick the dumbest misinformation possible. I'm struggling with it. And this is one of those things where, immediately I go, there it is, 1953, top marginal tax rate, 92%, it's right there. Can't screw that up. And I don't believe it. And, this is one of those things that my whole life has been down this, dealing with the believe people. And, I go back to, and I blame Reagan for a lot of this. The whole Reagan revolution brought us the believe people. No matter what you tell me, I'm not going to believe you because, I believe something different. And we just see things differently. There are no common facts anymore. I have my misinformation and you have yours, and never shall the two ever find reality. And it got me thinking about, how we've gotten to this point of being so divided. I'm someone who I'm an issues person. I want to get things done. I want the best policy we can get to achieve a goal. I believe our government is something that we use as a tool to do the things collectively that individually we cannot do. We can't educate the populace individually and have a coherent, educated populace. We can't, we can't pave the roads and build bridges individually. We could, but there'd be cash boxes all over. We can't do that individually. We do it collectively. And that's where I find myself. And then there's the identity people. This is my identity. And this was clearly this person who identified himself as a conservative. And that's his identity. That's who he is. And nothing can deviate from that belief system. And it's weird because, you talk to folks who put themselves in camps, they have to believe everything. I guess it's part of the oath that they take. I don't know if there's a weird oath to be a conservative. I don't. But we've been seeing this partisan divide for the last several decades, Reagan forward more than anything. And it's on, a bunch of simple issues. Race is one of the main dividers. Immigration, whether we should be involved in international things. You remember back in 2010, the right was losing their mind, apoplectic over the fact that we would give countries foreign aid to help keep their people at home. Just losing their minds. And also, the other big thing that has gone on, do we help the poor? I mean, Reagan forward, it's been all an attack on the welfare queen who's driving around in a Cadillac, drinking Dom Perignon, eating steak. She's doing better than you are. You're paying the bill. And people buy this. And there was never a welfare queen. They never found her. She may have been, hanging out with the guy who lost a small family farm because of the estate tax. But again, it comes back down to this belief. And we've been so easily divided. Divide and conquer wins always. And we've been sliced and diced and pitted and segregated based on race, based on gender, sexual orientation, the fear of others, those people. And the wealth class has done a masterful job of this. The people who have the privilege and the power and want to maintain that privilege and power, they're grasping it with a death grip, because what they're seeing and what their policies have brought us is mass inequality. People are struggling in this country. Things are difficult. And one of the ways they keep us divided is pitting us against one another because, hey, they might take something that's yours. I mean, this class war capitalism that's been heaped upon us, where we've seen a rise not just in inequality of income, but inequality of opportunity. Our millionaire class has gotten much more exclusive because we've allowed monopoly. They control the levers of power. And they've bought and controlled our media structure that cares more about sensationalism and clickbait than they do about the truth. I mean, again, I go back to, we've never had a moment in history where information is so readily available, and yet we choose to be ignorant, and we choose the most idiotic of misinformation. Now, the weird thing is, over the weekend, I had a listener send me an old study. This is, several years old, talking about privilege and hierarchy. And this is where my mind started going, and how the privileged cling to that power because they don't want to lose it. They've got it. They don't want to lose it. They've got all this wealth that we've given them. Again, we've slashed taxes in enormous ways. We've given massive loopholes so that they can amass fortunes under the guise that they know what to do with it, and it would trickle down. It would come down on us like rivers of gold and honey. And it never does. Their pockets never fill. Their coffers never overflow. Because their greed knows no bounds. And what this research suggested from several years back is that mass inequality, like we're seeing, predictably leads to violence, to racism, to extremism, all the things that we're leading to right now. Because, we're fighting over what's left of the crumbs. We're fighting over the scraps. And we're told, up. That guy's going to take your scrap. You better go get it. And not going, hey, we've got more wealth in this country than at any point in the course of human history. We could eradicate poverty. We could eradicate homelessness. We could do things that we all say we want when other people are listening, but we don't do it. And, I come back to this moment of divide and conquer wins always. If we can pit people against one another, like Jay Gould said, I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half. And it's what we're seeing. Look at what's playing out in front of us right now. What are Republican governors across the country doing? They're saying, oh, we got to cut that unemployment because those working people have got it too easy and they won't take those crummy jobs. No one wants to work. They all want to be lazy. They all want to be on the dole. When the reality is no one wants those crummy jobs. Because if you look at the job numbers, if you look at the income numbers, you look at the facts, people are taking the jobs above those. People are going back to work for a reasonable wage. People are entering the workforce. They're just not taking those, barely minimum wage or above, and in some cases, below minimum wage jobs because of the tipped minimum wage. They're even dividing the low-wage workforce against one another. And it's remarkable that they get away with it. Instead of everyone in the working class, like I do, say, no, if you want those people to come to work for you, you got to pay them better. You got to raise the wages, make better working conditions. And kind of what we're seeing, especially in that lowest rung of the economy, is you're seeing people saying, you know what? I do have a couple of bucks coming in right now that's making my life a little bit easier. It's going to give me choices. And I'm looking for the best option, which is what we want from unemployment. We don't want desperation and poverty. We want options. We want opportunity. And, you've got Republican governors across the country going, no. You go back to working those crummy jobs. You get to it. And what the political class has done is they've bowed to the wealth class, because the wealth class doesn't want to share. They've got a death grip on wealth. A little inequality, not a bad thing, they tell you. Makes people want to work harder. Nonsense. Better wages, better opportunities make people want to work harder. And like I said, what we're seeing is we're seeing people with options. And the employer class doesn't like that. So they're using the political class to force people back into a desperate situation. That's all we're seeing. Because this kind of quote-unquote labor shortage doesn't exist as you go up the ladder. It's just these poor folks. These poor folks who don't want to go back into crappy jobs, who pay them crummy wages with no future and no opportunity. There is a reorganizing of the workforce. And look, here's the interesting part for me. There's part of me that goes, Republicans are actually doing working people a favor on a certain level. Now, hear me out. They create a desperation class of workers who have to go back to these crummy jobs because they got kids to feed, they got bills to pay, and there's no benefit for them. At some point, the hope is especially if Joe Biden gets the PRO Act passed through and we remake labor law in this country, that there's an explosion of union organizing. That working people say, we've had enough. We've gone through the pandemic. We've been called essential and heroes and all kinds of things. And yet we're still struggling to keep food on the table. Our wages have been declining for decades. I was just explaining to someone the other day that, where I come from, the freight industry. When I started back in the late 80s, if you use those little calculators that the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out on inflation, what I started for back in the late 80s was over $30 an hour in today's dollars. Today they're paying 18. You go, 18's not so bad. Yeah, it's not so bad until you look at the fact that the gas station is paying 15. The wages have not kept up with inflation. The standard of living that people my age and older remember as possible, not there. Because we have had a massive redistribution of wealth from the people who do the actual work to the people who move money from one pocket to the other. And they do that through, again, a bunch of ways. Eliminating your ability to collectively bargain, pushing for laws that make it much harder to organize and to keep unions, and easier for them to replace people and break contracts and do all of the things that they've been able to do, and outsource and bring in cheaper labor. All those things that they've been doing for decades has caused for this stagnation of wealth. Which is, again, why you have so many people who grew up, like I did, believing in that mantra that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, that you would get ahead, that life would get better with hard work. Oddly enough, I still believe that. I still believe that if you get up every day, you go to work, you do your best, that you can get ahead. But again, for me, it comes back down to only if you have a contract, only if you have a union fighting for your better wages. I had a conversation with someone who told me, well, we don't need this. We don't need these contracts. We don't need that. The employer's good to us. And I said, no, the employer is not good to you. They're not benevolent. They didn't give you the things that you came here for. They were negotiated for. And the second that the contract goes away, you lose all of that. And then you're at their will. You're at their whim. And I think we've forgotten that. And for me, the only way that we bring this country back together to some level of sanity is we find economic equality. We find a way to revive that if you do work hard and play by the rules, you get ahead. That life gets better with work. I did agree with Ronald Reagan, who said the best anti-poverty program is a good job. I amend that to saying a good union job. That's what we need to be doing. And that's what I think Biden is doing. I think this infrastructure plan is a huge step in the right direction. A push to reshore our manufacturing and talk about, hey, how do we maintain critical supply chains? Things we absolutely need to do. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. After all, it is tax day. So we're going to come back and talk about, yay, taxes.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day 4,000 strikers and their supporters gathered for the March for Dignity and Respect in Laurel, Mississippi. Over 200 mostly black women members of the International Chemical Workers Union Local 882 had been on strike against Sanderson Farms chicken processing plant for 15 months. Trade unionists from as far away as Cincinnati, Memphis, and North Carolina came to march in support. Sanderson Farms had cleared $58 million in profit, but paid workers just $3 an hour. The women demanded a contract that included more control over assembly line speed, overtime pay, and insurance. They complained of desperately low wages, inhumane working conditions, and even the inability to use the bathroom when necessary. Workers were given only gloves and an apron once a month, and a file to sharpen their often dull and rusty scissors and knives. They often referred to the processing plant as the plantation, where sexual harassment was rampant. Women workers often found themselves given dangerous assignments or even fired if they didn't put up with sexual advances of their foreman. Workers maintained that strikebreakers from the community were desperately poor and threatened with violence if they quit by local Ku Klux Klansmen who worked as supervisors at the plant. Some were known to have been involved in the murder and or intimidation of civil rights workers in decades past. The plant had been organized in 1972, but was extraordinarily weak. Nonetheless, women strikers understood that the union still served as an invaluable resource in the midst of a largely unorganized South. By the following February, the NLRB ruled that Sanderson had to resume contract negotiations and allow strikers to return to their jobs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Now, I had this planned back for April 15th. This was supposed to be the big tax day back then, but thanks to Joe Biden pushing it off a little bit, another one of those things that the pandemic has done. A little over a month, you get to get your affairs in order and also make sure that people got all of their stuff in so that come July when the tax credits come out for people with children, we'll have all the information right in place and see where that goes. But today is tax day. I'm here to talk a little bit about their big rally. I've asked Bob Lord to come talk with us. Bob is counsel to the Americans for Tax Fairness. He's also an associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. The Tax Fairness folks had a rally today and here to talk about it. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Speaker Pelosi, you had the whole gang there. You had Ron Wyden, you had Lloyd Doggett, a whole bunch of folks out talking about why we need to raise taxes on the rich.
We did, and we do need to raise taxes on the rich.
That's a pretty quick conversation. I mean, this is one of those things where you go, I go back to something that happened to me today. I had someone tell me today that we're the most taxed society in the history of civilization, that we pay too much in taxes, and it's not true, but it's what we've internalized because it's what we've been told for so long that I think, again, like any bit of misinformation, we've bought it.
Well, how can it be that that the rich are taxed too much, Rick, when we have folks achieving wealth of over $100 billion? How can that be? That's just a stupid amount of wealth for one person or one household to have.
Yeah, I would argue immoral, but that's a whole nother discussion. But some would argue with you, Bob, that this is the land of opportunity, and that's what makes America great. That you can have it all, literally all of it, and that a little inequality is a good thing. Going to make people want to work harder, Bob.
To some extent, yes, Rick, but at some point, additional wealth means additional power, not additional comforts or anything like that. You can't spend $1 billion. You certainly can't spend $100 billion, nor can your great-great-grandchildren. So it's all about power at some point. And do we want to have folks accumulating wealth as a vehicle to consolidating power? That's what the estate tax was all about when Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, campaigned for it.
But here's the thing. Jeff Bezos is buying a $500 million boat. They are trying to spend it, creating jobs in the Netherlands. But, I digress. They're trying to spend some of it.
I'm sorry, I missed that last question, Rick.
They're trying to spend the money. I mean, Bezos is buying himself a $500 million boat that evidently is just like a floating island.
But he could buy 400 $500 million boats with his wealth, Rick. That's a lot of $500 million boats.
There is, and this is a conversation I've had with friends for a while. Someone like Bezos could end world hunger. Someone like Bezos could buy himself, instead of a giant yacht, could buy himself a legacy and history of being, a decent person.
Oh, absolutely. They could so easily do fantastic things with that wealth. But at some point, it's hoarding when they have so much wealth and they're focused on accumulating even more.
And the unfortunate part of it is they're the ones who are funding all of the people who say, no, we can't tax the rich because they're the smart people. They know what to do with it, and they do. They make more money for themselves.
Right. Well, there are the patriotic millionaires. They're out there very, very wealthy people saying, no, the rich need to step up and pay their fair share.
And in the next segment, we're going to have Morris Pearl come on and talk about his book, Tax the Rich, because I think this is an important theme for today as people are writing those checks and paying their taxes and seeing how much comes out of their wages. When you've got massive corporations who pay zero, when you've got rich people who are paying close to zero, I always go back to on tax day, Warren Buffett, who said that he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary does. There's something fundamentally wrong with that.
And I just finished reading Tax the Rich. It's a great read. Everybody should pick it up. And Morris Pearl's co-author, Erica Payne, if you have not had her on yet, you should.
No, she's great. But let's talk about Biden's plan. He's talking about raising taxes so that we can invest some $4 trillion in things that our society has desperately needed for decades: infrastructure improvements, child care plans, health care for everyone, a move to a green energy kind of scenario to help fight climate change. So many investments long overdue. It's time that we start saying, hey, we got to do this.
Well, if you weren't on board with that, I don't know, a week or so ago, you should be now, after seeing that bridge going from Memphis, Tennessee into Arkansas, having to be closed because it has a big crack in it.
Oh, there's no crack. It's broken. There's no crack. It is actually broken. I had someone send me a picture of the beam that they got with the drone. That's not a crack. It's two separate pieces.
And it was very lucky that they caught it when they did. It could have collapsed.
Yeah. And it's one of the most traveled bridges in the country. And, I keep saying, that could happen just about anywhere because our infrastructure is old. Last major investments we did, major investments, go back to Eisenhower and building the highway system.
And think of the jobs that it will create. It's not a brainer.
Yeah, again, it comes back to this very simple. You invest in infrastructure, you create jobs, the economy gets moving, things get better, which is why I believe, and I know you're a nonpartisan organization, but this is why I think Republicans aren't on board with it, because they know that this will be a huge win for Joe Biden and for the Democrats and for the American people. Democrats, Republicans, independents, every stripe. Because they'll have jobs, we'll have investments, and there will be a reverberation effect through the economy that will just heat things up and create wealth for the folks on the bottom.
Well, that's the strategy, Rick, right? That's what they did to Obama in 2009 and 2010. And Mitch McConnell has made it pretty clear that that's what they intend to do now. They're purporting to be agreeable to a really kind of trifling infrastructure package. But you'll see, just like they did in 2009 and 2010, they'll wind up voting against it.
Yeah, I always find it interesting when people put out legislation that they themselves don't vote for, and we've seen a bunch of that happen over the last several days. That it just makes you go, they're not being honest, and I sadly see that coming from our friends across the aisle, and this used to be a no-brainer thing, Bob. Infrastructure, I have a friend who's a former congressman, and he said these were yawn votes. You went in, everyone got something to bring home to their district. Everyone got to have their ribbon cutting ceremonies. Everyone got to be, hey, thanks for bringing that library or that hospital or that road or whatever. We don't do this anymore. And there's something wrong with
government is supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
Private people can't be building roads. You need the government to be doing that. And then there is all of the work that needs to be done to address climate change. And, the tax dollars are there. You've got 700 billionaires controlling, I think it's $4.5 trillion of wealth. They can pay more. I think it was Joe Biden that said they'll still be able to have 10 homes and 3 private jets even after they pay their taxes.
Yeah. They'll be fine. Thank you very much. Their great-grandchildren, 15 generations down the road, they'll be fine too. Because I always like to point out, because you'd mentioned the estate tax. One of the first people to pay the estate tax, back then it was 70%, was John D. Rockefeller. And interestingly enough, all these years later, they're still wealthy Rockefellers.
That's right. Years later, I mean, I haven't looked at it recently, but before he died, David Rockefeller was worth over $1 billion.
Yeah, they do okay. Thank you very much. And this is one of those things where you go, we need to invest where our billionaire class doesn't. And yet I hear people say, Bob, that you're just jealous. They're smart. They've amassed this fortune. You're just jealous. How do you deal with that jealousy, anger? Because I think it was Steinbeck who said we're all embarrassed millionaires. I guess we're all embarrassed billionaires now. How do you respond to that?
I have trouble seeing it. I spent my career as a tax lawyer. I'm not a billionaire, but I'm not jealous of them. I can do what I want to do on much, much, much less wealth. If I want to play golf, I can play golf. If I want to go on a vacation, I can go on a vacation. Nobody needs a private jet. Nobody needs 10 different homes. No, I don't think it's jealousy. I think it's frustration that they see all this wealth being squirreled away and not being put to the uses that it could be put to make life better for hundreds of millions of Americans.
Now, one of the things I was talking about at the beginning is, the kind of division that we have now, the kind of extremism that we're seeing, the kind of, just polarization that's happened. I blame on our inequality. As inequality gets worse, all of those things, all of the divisions become much more magnified. The way we're sliced and diced up by, male, female, race, gender, sexual orientation, any of those things becomes much more magnified. I fear the more divided we get, the more inequality grows. It's just this kind of vicious cycle until we're literally tearing each other apart in the streets.
Well, absolutely, because with the inequality, the people at the bottom are suffering, and when people are suffering, it's not hard to get them to scapegoat others.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's I guess that's what the things have pointed out. So how I keep coming back to this, because I want solutions. Is Biden's plan of taxing anybody over $400,000 a year, is that a step in the right direction, or is it more division?
No, I think it's a step in the right direction, and emphasis on it only being a step. I've spent my career as a tax lawyer, and I look at Biden's plan, and my take on it is, it's, if anything, too modest. There are a lot of steps that I would want to take that aren't in the Biden plan.
Give me a few.
I'll give you, excuse me?
Give me a few.
One is closing what are gaping loopholes in the estate tax. We have billionaires who are not paying any estate tax because it's so easy to avoid. These corporations that are buying back stock rather than issuing dividends is causing us to lose a tremendous amount of tax dollars. Raising the corporate rate to 28%, well, really it could be higher than 28%. The individual rate at 39.6%, you go back to the Eisenhower administration, top rate was 91%. In my mind, we hear all the time, Rick, that the rich have to pay their fair share. But what is their fair share? And to me, their fair share is the amount of tax that will stop this horrendous concentration of wealth at the top and start deconcentrating that wealth and bringing it back to the people. As long as wealth continues to concentrate at the top, we know the rich are not paying their fair share.
Yeah. And the argument then being, look, back in the Eisenhower years, no one paid the top marginal tax rate. No one paid that 91, 92% tax rate. Because there were ways for them to do it. They invested, they gave money to schools, they built hospitals, they built libraries, they invested in the communities in which they lived, which is why there are people's names slapped over all these buildings, which I'm not opposed to. but they use those resources for the common good, higher wages for workers, better conditions, all of those things that they chose to use their money differently than just hoarding it. Because look, I'm not in favor of the government just taking everybody's money. Use it better, invest it better here, give people better opportunities.
But back during in the Eisenhower days, CEOs were making 20 or 30 times the income of the average worker. In some cases now they're making several thousand times the income of the average worker.
That's because they're smarter.
But it's also because there's a much lower top tax rate. If there were a higher top tax rate, you wouldn't see corporations paying their CEOs 30 or 40 or 50 million dollars in a year, because the government would be getting 80 or 90% of it. The tax policy of the Eisenhower years really did work to keep things more equal.
No, and we've got to come back to some bit of that and the common understanding of what that looks like. Because like I said, I had a conversation today with somebody who said, we've never been taxed. We've never been this taxed any time in the course of human history. And I'm going, I think you should probably learn to read.
We've never been taxed less.
And this is where people start going, well, someday I'm going to be that guy and I don't want to pay it. We're embarrassed billionaires.
Right. That's a huge problem.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, out of this rally you guys held today, what are the marching orders? Because obviously this is a political move to get people to start pushing in a direction that we raise taxes, we invest. You've got someone like Joe Manchin, who's not in favor of raising up to just 28% of corporate taxes. What were their marching orders? What was the outcome?
The marching orders are get involved. If call your congressman, call your senator. If there's a rally near you, go to it. Show strength. Write letters to the editor. Do whatever you can to make your views known. And if you live in West Virginia, or if you live in Arizona, where I do, where some of these so-called moderate Democrats are not sure if they want to support this, you're really important.
Yeah, we got lots of work to do, and the simple message is, just going back to the caveman days. The bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry back. We need to be thinking in those terms again. But Bob, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff, Bob, Lord Counsel for the Americans for Tax Fairness. Make sure you check out their website, americansfortaxfairness.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down their decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In the unanimous decision, the court declared that racial segregation in public education was illegal. The case was filed for Linda Brown, a student who had been denied enrollment in her local elementary school because she was black. The court's decision overturned the concept of separate but equal. This legal basis for discrimination and segregation had been established by the Supreme Court earlier in their 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision. The Brown decision overturned nearly 6 decades of legally sanctioned racism. The American Federation of Teachers filed an amicus brief, or friend of the court brief, in support of the Brown family. The union's motion stated, quote, "The American Federation of Teachers, whose 60,000 classroom teacher members represent the group which does the actual work of teaching the nation's children, is committed to a practice of complete equality between teachers and children of every race. This principle is written indelibly in its Constitution and bylaws." In addition, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City also filed a brief with the court in support of Brown. Even after the court's decision, school desegregation did not come easy. Mobs of angry white Southerners showed up at schools to protest the admission of black students. In 1957, the National Guard had to protect 9 black students attempting to enroll in school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The United Teachers Union led the American Federation of Teachers to expel Southern Union locals that refused to abide by the desegregation decision. The Brown decision helped to launch the civil rights movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Bidens released their tax returns today. Looks like they earned just over $607,000, mostly through book sales, speeches, and, of course, Jill Biden's positions at the University of Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia Community College. On that $607,000, they paid a tax rate of nearly 26%. The average American pays about 14%. I think I'm right somewhere right about there. But here's the thing: when you've got, as Warren Buffett says, he pays a tax rate lower than his secretaries. Houston, we have a problem, and it's time to start talking about how do we tax our wildly wealthy. And here to share some thoughts on how we do that, the man who has literally written the book on taxing the rich. I've asked Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. Patrioticmillionaires.org is their website. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Great to be in your show, Rick.
So tax the rich. That's the message today, yes?
Yeah. That is the message. The part of our problem in America today is that rich people, investors, pay much lower tax rates than people who work for a living. It's just not fair.
You know, we hear people talk about, especially my Republican friends who, I go back to Ronald Reagan, the best anti-poverty program's a job. I've said, I've amended that to being a union job. But, the idea that working hard, playing by the rules, being able to get ahead, something I'm all in favor of. Sadly, that hasn't really panned out for a lot of folks.
We think that people who are rich should not have lower taxes than people who actually work for a living. That's why part of the reason why the rich are getting richer and richer and richer. Even if I spend the same exact amount as you do every year, because I pay less to the government in taxes, I'll get richer and richer and richer. Someone who makes $100,000 a year in, say, long-term capital gains pays not one single penny in taxes. If you make $100,000 a year as wages, they'll deduct $8,000 from your pay.
That's screwed up, isn't it?
Yeah.
So basically what we've done is we've rewarded gambling and we're punishing work.
We've rewarded being rich. That's what we've rewarded. I mean, I don't think what I do is gambling. I think it's just earning a return on my investments. So what for you would be the right way, if you had the magic wand, to go about taxing someone like you who, clearly you've done very well for yourself. Congratulations. But you're saying, hey, look, tax me a little bit more because I want roads and bridges and education systems and healthcare. I want decent for everyone else. I live here in New York City, and lots of people live in New York City. It's the biggest city in population in our country. And people are moving here from all over the world because of all the things we have. Universities and hospitals and theaters and all of the stuff that makes that infrastructure that makes people want to work here and build businesses here. And we need to continue that, and we need to have enough money in our commonwealth. That's why we named our states commonwealths to begin with, because we need commonwealth. We have to have enough commonwealth to allow that to continue to happen. I want my 2-year-old granddaughter to have the same opportunities that I did growing up, and she won't if she grows up in a country with a few rich people and lots and lots and lots of poor people, even if she's one of the rich people. Yeah, but Morris, we're told, I just read an article from somebody at George Mason University the other day who said inequality is a good thing because we have the ability to be uber wealthy. You can come here and you can make your fortune. You could be the next Jeff Bezos. You can have it all. And that inequality problem, well, that just makes those people want to work a little harder.
I'm in favor of people being rich. I mean, I run a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, for God's sakes. I think everybody should be a millionaire. I highly recommend it. You should try it, Rick.
I would love to.
But I do think that those people who have the good fortune, and yes, part of it is good fortune, part of it is hard work, part of it is starting out with a lot of money. Don't forget, Jeff Bezos is brilliant and worked very hard, but he started out with hundreds of thousands of dollars from his parents and being able to live without a paycheck for years when he first started Amazon. So it's not like everybody can do that. And those people who have the good fortune and all the other things it needs to build a big, successful billion-dollar business should pay at least the same tax rate as people who actually work for a living.
Yeah, no, a lot of us go back and talk about the good socialist years of Dwight David Eisenhower. And hit the tax rate that was back then. Would you say that's too high? I mean, you had a top marginal tax rate of 91%, a corporate tax rate of 56%. I mean, we were taxing rich people a lot back then.
Look, hey, our country was great back then. Seemed to work. I don't see any lack of greatness. I mean, we had some problems back then with, say, racist laws, but the country worked. People wanted to work for a living. People felt connected to their employers. People felt a bond with the people that ran their companies because they basically lived kind of the same way. You know, the guy making tens of thousands of dollars a year and the guy making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year were kind of lived in the same communities and sent their kids to the same schools, but the guy who's making $1 billion a year and the guy's making tens of thousands of dollars a year probably don't live the same way.
Yeah,
probably don't have the same concerns.
No, it's an excellent point, and I think one that's lost an awful lot. That our wealth class has abandoned our inner cities, has abandoned our school systems because they have private schools that they send their kids to. And I think it was Buffett who said it. People may vote for a small tax increase to help the local schools, but it's not their kids. The wealthy send their kids to private schools and get the best of everything without doing just what you said, being part of the community and lifting everybody up, including themselves.
I haven't seen the inside of a private school except for on election day when I go to vote in decades, because my kids went to private schools. They did. And, I don't feel bad about that, but that's what I did.
No, it's because you had the opportunity to give them the best education you could get them. But, in the situation that you're talking about, had they gone to the public school, I'm sure you would have been there trying to increase the opportunities for your kids as well as everybody else.
I'm sure I would have known a lot more about the public schools than I actually did know if my kids went there. But frankly, part of the problem is that rich people, they think that they're different than regular people. Did you notice that so many of the Republicans are saying, oh, the problem with America is that people get too much unemployment insurance.
Right.
And that's why they're not willing to work. But if a company's not doing something right, they say, oh, we should give this company more money. So they have more money to trickle down to people. They don't say, oh, we should give the company less money so they'll struggle more and have more incentive to work hard. Why don't we think the same logic applies to rich people and regular people who work for a living? Because it does.
Right.
People think the same way. If you give somebody extra money, they'll have more money. If you take away some of their money, they'll have less money. That's true with rich people, and it's true with people who work for a living.
Now, we're told, and you as an investor, I'm sure can speak to this better than I can, but we're told that if we take that money from you and from other wealthy folks, that the investment won't be there. We won't be able to invest in businesses and create jobs. And then we lowly people down at the bottom will have nowhere to work.
Well, if I pay more taxes, it's true. I'll have less money. I will have less money, but that does not affect the companies I invest in. For instance, I have stock in Apple. That won't make any difference to Apple. If I decide to sell some of the Apple stock to spend the money or pay taxes, do whatever, that will not make one iota of difference to them. I'll sell it to some other investor who wants to buy it that day. And the same with any company. Whether or not I pay taxes on my profits when I buy and sell stock has nothing to affect the actual companies that issued that stock. And I don't have any alternative to invest my money. I mean, I could keep my money in cash and keep it here in this chair, but that won't earn me any return at all. I would rather invest my money and earn a return and keep part of it than to just have a pile of cash sitting in my apartment and earn nothing. That will be a way of avoiding taxes, I suppose, but it won't actually make me more money.
Right. No, and so the question then comes down to, where is the right number? Because, Joe Biden's come out with a plan, said no one under $400,000 is going to see an increase in their tax rates. We're seeing a whole bunch of numbers being thrown around for corporate tax rates. It's basically just divvying up the pie of who gets what. Is there a right number? Is there somewhere that you and the Patriotic Millionaires are advocating for? What do you see?
We suggested that no one who makes less than $1 million should pay more taxes. Do we think rich people are people who make like $1 million a year or have millions and millions of dollars in assets? I really don't think that people who make $400,000 a year are necessarily other than higher middle class people. There's plenty of people who have who have a spouse where both people in the family earn a good living as doctors or lawyers, whatever, who make $400,000 a year. Those aren't the people who I'm talking about taxing. We are talking about people who make millions and billions of dollars not paying their fair share.
Yeah, because I remember when AOC came out and said that I think the number was 40% over. I think the number she threw out was like $10 million or something, and the Republicans lost their minds. 40%. Oh my God, it's unthinkable, and yet you stop and think about it. We've come from a place that was much higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, think about, Mitt Romney and those stories he told about when he was growing up. His parents paid a lot more than 40% in taxes.
So now Biden's plan, because we talked about this a little bit earlier, this idea we're gonna spend about $4 trillion in investing in infrastructure and healthcare and all of these things. I make the argument that these investments are just as important to someone like you as they are to someone like me, because we're creating an environment that you can operate and you can do business and ultimately profit off of as well. Is that a reasonable argument, do you think?
Yes, maybe even more important to me than to you. I don't know. I'd like to travel around a lot. I'd like to use the highways. I'd like to take advantage of the air traffic control system. I'd like to use airports all over the country. There's a lot of things I'd like to do that I haven't done in a year that I'd like to start doing again.
Yeah, me as well. Now, you've written the book, literally written the book, Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. And I hope folks will go to patrioticmillionaires.org to take a look at how you can get that. I can't imagine you're overly popular at the cocktail parties when you're rubbing elbows with your other millionaires.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, the only cocktail parties I've been to lately have been virtual ones where we've been doing fundraisers for political candidates, and they don't seem to mind because, frankly, most people are on our side. It's just a tiny minority of people, but that tiny minority of people has been able to make their views so much better known than anyone else's views that they've been convincing Congress people that they represent the true Americans or something like that. And it's just not true.
Yeah, because I don't like the frame of being jealous of someone who's done better. I try not to be in that frame. But ultimately, I know for democracy, it's not good to have someone who has such overweighted power on one hand and a whole bunch of people who have virtually none. So for me, I like the idea of being somewhere on at least in the stadium when you're talking about wealth.
I mean, part of our problem is the richest people have been using their money to get more political power, and then they've been using that newfound political power to make even more money. And that's been just a spiral that's been spiraling and spiraling and leaving the vast majority of Americans behind. And we have to do something about it. And that's what the President Biden is finally trying to do.
So what do we do? What do average everyday people, what do you want our listeners to do? What's the marching order out of this day, because obviously tax day, everyone hates paying taxes. But, as I said, it's at the beginning, it's the price of admission to live in a free society that has education and health care and roads and bridges and a military and all the things, a police and fire department, all the things that we take for granted. What's the marching order?
Well, you can look at taxtherich.com. You can get a copy of our book. If you can't afford it, I'll even send us your address and I will send you a copy for free. That'll be fine. We have taxtherich.com and we have patrioticmillionaires.org. Even if you're not a millionaire, you can still sign up and we'll give you marching orders. And those orders will be calling your senators and telling them that you're a voter and you want to tax the rich and you want to make our country the kind of country that people grew up in and were very successful. And we want that to be for our grandchildren too.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who, when they talk to their representatives, they talk to senators, really intimidated. It's not that difficult, is it?
They work for you. It's not like you work for them. They need your approval every 2 years or 6 years to continue their job. They need you more than you need them, and you have to remember that.
No, and this is what's interesting to me, because, you would think they're more. I've always said that the wealthy have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. Why is it that we continue to vote for people who continue to make this situation as bad as it is, if not worse?
Because somehow politicians, starting with Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, told people, oh, we have to appease the rich people or else they'll take their ball and move to Somalia or something. And they've somehow come up with this appeasement policy. Oh, we can't offend the rich people or they'll be mean to us or stop liking us or something. No, as I was saying, people invest in businesses to make money. If people make money and pay some in taxes, that's better than making no money at all. And if we tax all types of income the same, people have the same incentives they do now. They'll still invest money and make money, and that's better than not making money.
That's an excellent point. But for me, as a working person, it's always been, and take offense, but I look at, investing as something of a gamble sometimes. We put money into on our retirement accounts and things like that. But, I look at somebody who's going and swinging a hammer 40 hours a week or driving a truck. I see that as different, and I think the tax rates should be different. I think people who work for a living should clearly pay less taxes than somebody who's moving money from one pocket to the other.
And right now, it's exactly the opposite.
Yep.
Because those people who make money by moving numbers around on the computer screen and buying and selling stock have somehow convinced Congress that, oh, we're special and what we do is so important that we need to be encouraged. It's not like there's a national shortage of people who want to be stock traders or hedge fund managers or something. We have to have some special deal to encourage more people to go into those fields. If anything, we have a shortage of people who want to be nurses. We should have a special tax rate for them to encourage more people to go into that line of work, if not in my opinion.
I agree. The book, again, Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer, written by Morris Pearl and Erica Payne. We'll get links out on how you can get there. Check out patrioticmillionaires.org. Lots of ways to get involved. Morris, I appreciate the time, as always. Good stuff.
Great to be in your show, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Morris Pearl. Again, patrioticmillionaires.org. Check it out. Quick break right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1838. The second anti-slavery convention of American women was being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. For a while, a group of anti-slavery abolitionists had difficulty finding a venue in the city willing to host their convention. Discouraged by their plight, they had decided to build their own facilities. They raised money, built, and christened their new building Pennsylvania Hall. It opened on May 14th, and just 4 days later, a pro-slavery mob circled the new hall. Alarmed by the unrest, the mayor of Philadelphia convinced the abolitionists to move their meeting away from Pennsylvania Hall. The angry mob burned Pennsylvania Hall to the ground.
One observer noted, describing the scene, flames burst in rolling masses from the windows. Soon the whole building was enveloped in one dense, dark-colored sheet of flame. Undeterred by the violence, the abolitionist women moved their meeting to a large private home. One of those scheduled to speak was Sarah T. Smith. Her eloquent words stood in stark contrast to the ugliness that took place at Pennsylvania Hall. She began her speech by saying, "We are told that it is not within the province of women to discuss the subject of slavery, that it is a political question, and we are stepping out of our sphere when we take part in its discussion. It is not true that it is merely a political question. It is likewise a question of justice, of humanity, of morality, of religion." She went on to say it was a matter of whether the laborer shall receive the reward of his labor or be driven by unrequited toil. In the end, those who lit the fire that reduced Pennsylvania Hall to ashes could not quell the fire for justice that was lit by the abolitionists' cause.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith.
Not only are the rich different from you and me, they're getting more different than ever. I'm not referring to mere millionaires, but to the billionaire bunch. In the past year, while ordinary Americans have lost jobs, businesses, and homes due to the pandemic economic crash, America's 664 billionaires have found themselves nearly 40% richer than before COVID. These fortunate few collectively added more than $1 trillion in 2020 to their personal stashes of wealth. And practically all of them got so much richer by doing nothing. Their money made the extra money for them because corporate stock prices zoomed even as regular people lost income. Take a peek at the richest of these different ones, Jeff Bezos, the alpha geek of Amazon. He hauled in an additional $75 billion last year, roughly $37 million an hour. You could do a lot of good with such riches, or you could splurge on yourself. Jeff splurged. He bought one of the largest sailing vessels ever built. More than 1 1/3 football fields long, the super yacht cost the diminutive mega-billionaire some $500 million. Plus, he'll pay some $60 million each year for operating expenses. Also, he had to buy a support yacht to sail along with his main boat. Why? Because the 3 sails on his 400-footer are so huge that a helicopter can't land on the deck, requiring an auxiliary yacht to provide a helipad. See, the rich really are different. Where to park our helicopter while at sea is a problem you and I don't have to face. This is Jim Hightower saying, according to mega yacht sellers, the main draw of these ostentatious purchases is that they reinforce inequality, literally letting the rich float in leisure and luxury oceans apart from even having to see hoi polloi like us. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So tomorrow's primary day, election day here in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that's coming up, 4 ballot initiatives, 4 ballot questions. We don't do initiatives here. 4 ballot questions that have popped up. And 2 of them, very interesting. You gotta love when Republicans get something, what's that? A burr in their saddle? Is that how it is? 2 of the questions have to do with during times of emergency. Not happy with how the governor handled the pandemic, so their goal to go in and strip all future governors of emergency powers. So when you go to vote tomorrow, the first question is the Emergency Declarations Amendment that they want to put in. They want to reduce the governor's ability to invoke his powers to react to a crisis for 21 days. That's it. That's all you got. And then you have to go and you have to beg the legislature
to do something. And this is one of those weird moments because our legislature is so badly divided that I'm in a moment of crisis. Do you really want to put Mitch McConnell or someone like him in a position to gridlock and to hold the country or people hostage for what they get? I mean, is that the goal? I mean, it's really kind of weird. The second one is a legislative resolution to extend or terminate the emergency declaration amendment. What they say is this would empower the legislature to extend or terminate this power that the governor has. So two things to restrict the governor's ability to react during a crisis. Now remember, these are people who don't want government to do anything. These are people who don't want any intervention by a government entity. These are the people who tell you government can't work. These are people who clearly don't believe in the power of government. And when you look at this, you kind of go back to this moment where do you really want to give the legislature that kind of power to limit our governor's ability, any governor's ability, to deal with a crisis, to deal with an emergency? I know I don't. I'll be voting against the first two. The third one is the third question is an equal rights question. Should people have equal rights under the law? It prohibits denial of rights on the account of individual race or ethnicity. That I agree with. And also the fourth one is about fire departments and municipalities being able to take loans where volunteer fire departments have access to doing that. These are really important questions. That's why I've asked Pennsylvania State Senator Sharif Street to come talk with us about why they're on the ballot and why they're of the utmost important. Senator Street, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I look at these ballot questions. I mean, the first two of them to me are kind of offensive. It's kind of saying that we can't have someone to deal with a crisis, much like the pandemic we just lived through, that we've got to go through the legislative process of gridlock and delay and all of that. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, that's exactly right. We would have to go through a legislative process. And look, the legislature is designed to be a deliberative body. And for folks who don't know what that means a body that takes its time and figures things out. Now, one, I don't think this legislative body has necessarily deliberated as much as it should and has come up with great answers. But even if you had the best legislative body ever, it still is not designed to respond in a crisis. To have to convene 50 senators and get 26 of them to agree, we have a process of sending bills to committee. That reports to the floor, it gets assigned to a committee, it goes back to the floor, it goes to Appropriations Committee, it goes back to the floor of the Senate, and then it has to go to the House. And the same thing has to happen all over again. If they change one word, it goes back to the Senate, we start the whole process all over again. If we change one word, it goes back to an emergency. It's not designed for an emergency, and it would really cripple the Commonwealth's ability to respond to emergencies.
Isn't that the point, though? I mean, ultimately, isn't this the point? This is because the governor took the actions he did at the beginning of the pandemic, and Republicans didn't like it.
It's exactly right. They want to cripple this governor, in part because they don't like the decisions he made, in part because I think they believe there's political gain to be had by doing it. But the reality is, if we had not made, the governor had not made the decisions that he made, we would be in real trouble right now. More people would have died, and Pennsylvania would be even worse off than it is today. And the other part of it is they've said repeatedly that there's no mechanism for anyone to stop the governor. That's not true. With a simple, with a 2/3 majority, we can override the governor at any time, but it requires that there actually be bipartisan, real consensus to do it. And the reason it's set up that way is you don't want just a partisan group of people throwing out an emergency order And so it would have to, if you had a governor that was truly acting outside of the interests of the people of Pennsylvania, and Democrats and Republicans alike recognized it, then we could stop it. But as long as it allows the governor to move quickly, get things done the way things are written now, and these changes would cripple this governor's ability, and it is mostly a vindictive move because they don't like the results.
No, I know it is a vindictive move, but also it's a motivating move, because I know a lot of Republican voters who aren't thrilled with the party, aren't thrilled with the former guy, but this is getting them all wadded up and all tingly in the panties, because they want to take their misery and their anger out on somebody. And this is the kind of red meat that I think Republicans do a masterful job of throwing out to their base.
Absolutely. And then they look up a year from now, 2 years from now, and when Pennsylvania is, our ability to respond to crises are eliminated and people are doing bad, I guarantee you they won't want to step up and take responsibility for the decisions that they made should this pass. So I think it's up to the people of Pennsylvania to reject this kind of suggestion and make sure these ballot questions fail, so that we can continue to have responsible government.
Now, I see a lot of signs. I see a lot of money poured into this. Again, this to me seems more political than practical. This seems more about organizing than it is about actually good governance. And I can't believe I'm going to put good governance in the same sentence with the current GOP. But there's a lot of money pushing behind this, as where I don't see a real campaign on the other side.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, I think the GOP has put a lot of money in this because it is part of their misinformation campaign and because they don't have real substantive things to talk about. And this is what they're good at, misdirection, getting people not to focus on what's happening. They put a lot of misinformation out there. The money that they put out there to suggest that the governor is connected as a dictator, completely false. All the narrative and all the discussions around these constitutional amendments completely false. They're based on a false premise, and they're done in bad faith.
So the other two that are there's an equal rights amendment that they're pushing for, that no one can be denied based on their race or ethnicity. I'm voting yes for that. I'm voting no on the first two. I'm voting yes on that. How'd that get put in here? Because some would argue, Senator Street, that we already have the guarantee of equal rights under our Constitution and under the federal Constitution. Why do we need this special amendment?
Well, first of all, I would agree that we already have those protections. Look, I would say that this was put there because it was in a bill with the other two questions, and it was done so the Republicans could say that their bill wasn't all bad. This is a provision that adds some protections. I'm voting yes on that question as well. However, there is an argument, I think it's a reasonable one, that we have those protections. Enhancing them at the state level is never a bad thing. Reinforcing the idea that we are reaffirming civil rights protections is a good thing. But it is as long as the federal Constitution is, and I think these are provisions not likely to change, it doesn't change the lives of many Pennsylvanians. It is an affirmation of the best of our values. And
the final one, the allowing municipalities for their fire departments to borrow money, much like the volunteers departments get to do. Why isn't this something that's already in place?
You know what? I'm not sure.
And why do we need an amendment to the Constitution to do that?
I don't think we do. I think they can borrow money without. I think we can do that by simple statute. I think that many of them have the ability to borrow money. Again, I don't see any reason that this needs to be a constitutional amendment. However, I voted yes. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't allow volunteer firefighters to borrow money. Again, though, not really something that makes a lot of sense to put in the Constitution. It doesn't need to be there, but I don't know any reason why there's any harm in it being there. But this is something we could do statutorily. We don't need a constitutional amendment. See, that's where I'm at. So walk me through how, if these pass, what's the process to get these, into our Constitution? Well, if they pass, they will be placed in the Constitution. I mean, that's what happens. in order for a constitutional amendment to happen, it's a long step process, and this is the very end of the road. It has to pass the state legislature in 2 successive sessions, and it then, once it passes the legislature in 2 successive sessions, it goes to a vote of the people, and if it passes that, then it goes in our Constitution. I would say this: the firefighter one is, again, like you said, an organizing tool to try and fire up folks in Republican areas to get them to come out and vote. It's not something Democrats necessarily oppose, but it's also not necessary. It's just, I think this is more about them giving their voters something to pay attention to. It's a little bit of misdirection. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have the kind of vicious, harmful effects of the other ones, but it's just unnecessary.
Again, it's about riling up the base. I did want to get your thoughts on, Pennsylvania hasn't looked as crazy as other states when looking at the last election. I mean, we're crazy. There's been a lot of insanity that's gone on in our General Assembly. But more recently, Arizona has looked really, really bad. For those who are listening, how many of your colleagues, still buy into this idea that the former guy won the last election?
I haven't polled them. I haven't heard too many of my colleagues saying that, although I do believe that we have more than zero. So there are at least a couple of them I suspect believe that. I think that most of the Senate wants to move on and govern based on today. But we do have some colleagues in the Senate, and I think there are more in the House that believe that haven't accepted the results of the election. But I think most of the leadership in the state Senate has accepted the results of the election.
And the reason I ask you that is because I'm sure you've paid attention to what's going on in Georgia and in 40 plus states across this country as bills are going through their legislatures to limit people's access to the ballot box and, basically trying to suppress the vote. And it's interesting to me that the most recent CBS News YouGov poll, asked Republican voters if Republican leaders should be pushing more on messaging to get out political ideas and issues and policies, or if they should be pushing to change state voting rules. And 47% of Republican voters said we need to be changing state voting rules to get Republicans elected. That's frightening to me. How much of this is going on in the Senate as we speak?
Well, look, there are not much. There are a bunch of people who've introduced bills. A lot of bills have been introduced in the House as well that do all the things that we've seen in Georgia, we've seen other places. However, because we know that the governor will veto those provisions, and we do have the votes to sustain a veto. I chair state government committee, among other committees, that those bills would have to come through. I've talked with my chairs. I don't think that my Republican counterpart is looking to waste his time. I don't know what the case would be if we had a Republican governor. I don't know what the pressure would be in that caucus to try and do some of these things. But fortunately, Governor Wolf has made it clear that he will veto things that would disenfranchise voters in Pennsylvania. And if he does, we will sustain his veto and they will not become law. And so there hasn't been a lot of energy around it. But I think in large part that's just because they know they can't change the law in those ways in Pennsylvania because they don't have the votes. I would say but there are those bills have all been introduced, and if something were terrible to happen and the Republicans remained in control of both the House and Senate and won the governor's office, I think they would absolutely move to disenfranchise voters. But right now, we're not seeing that. And right now, I think the leadership is being pragmatic, knowing that they just don't have the power to do
that. I guarantee if we have a Republican governor in 2022, in January 2023, Pennsylvania is the next right-to-work state, and all of these horrible voter suppression tactics will pass along with it, which is why, hopefully, you guys do something on the gubernatorial front.
Yeah, we need to. And by the way, I hate the term right to work because what it really means right to work without protections, right to work without collective bargaining, right to work without adequate benefits, right to work for inadequate pay, because people have the right to work now, but they have the right to work with and be organized. What they really are is anti-organizing bills. And so I don't like to let them frame the discussion by calling right to work. I know that's what they're nationally called, but they certainly are. It implies that they're improving the rights of workers, but nothing could be further from the truth. And that's one of many reasons why we have to keep a Democratic governor, because we cannot allow the basic rights of Pennsylvania to be stripped away, whether it's the right to organize or the right to vote.
Simple stuff. Senator Street, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
Thank you, my friend.
Good stuff. Senator Sharif Street. Look, at the end of it, he's spot on the no rights at work stuff. I've said it before. We get a Republican governor, 2023. Bad things. Bad things. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day 4,000 strikers and their supporters gathered for the March for Dignity and Respect in Laurel, Mississippi. Over 200 mostly black women members of the International Chemical Workers Union Local 882 had been on strike against Sanderson Farms chicken processing plant for 15 months. Trade unionists from as far away as Cincinnati, Memphis, and North Carolina came to march in support. Sanderson Farms had cleared $58 million in profit, but paid workers just $3 an hour. The women demanded a contract that included more control over assembly line speed, overtime pay, and insurance. They complained of desperately low wages, inhumane working conditions, and even the inability to use the bathroom when necessary. Workers were given only gloves and an apron once a month, and a file to sharpen their often dull and rusty scissors and knives. They often referred to the processing plant as the plantation, where sexual harassment was rampant. Women workers often found themselves given dangerous assignments or even fired if they didn't put up with sexual advances of their foreman. Workers maintained that strikebreakers from the community were desperately poor and threatened with violence if they quit by local Ku Klux Klansmen who worked as supervisors at the plant. Some were known to have been involved in the murder and or intimidation of civil rights workers in decades past. The plant had been organized in 1972, but was extraordinarily weak. Nonetheless, women strikers understood that the union still served as an invaluable resource in the midst of a largely unorganized South. By the following February, the NLRB ruled that Sanderson had to resume contract negotiations and allow strikers to return to their jobs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, I look at that CBS poll that says that, Republican voters, 53% of them say that, they should be pushing for better messaging, better policies, better ideas, actually having ideas, while 47% say, no, we don't need ideas. We don't need no stinking ideas. We just suppress the vote. We just push for the changes in the laws to get those people from voting. And I'm someone who believes I don't care who you vote for, everyone should vote. The basic mantra is you cannot complain unless you have voted. And it's one of those things. If you haven't voted, I don't want to hear it. You don't get a say. No say from you. But this does show to me some interesting things that if that's the view, that we just don't want people voting, we don't want to compete on ideas, that tells me they're devoid of ideas. And as I said earlier, I don't take any identity from being a registered Democrat. I don't take any identity from being liberal or progressive. I take no identity in that. If they're wrong, they're wrong. If their ideas are bad, their ideas are bad. I've often said, I'm a green conservative liberal libertarian. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea, and let's pursue that. This is kind of frightening to me, but I guess predictable in that, it's not so much about the issues. It's not so much about getting things done, because ultimately these are the folks who have told us for years. They don't believe in government. They don't want government intervention in anything. So it's perfectly predictable that they would pursue constitutional amendments to strip a government body of any power to deal with a crisis. And I gotta ask the question, if you're in that place, do you want a neutered government? Do you want somebody who's going to be able to respond in that moment of crisis? I don't like the idea of dictatorial power, and the right has sure jumped all over Wolf for making what were at the time the right choices. I wonder, however, how bad things would have been had we someone like Tom Corbett. How bad would have things have been if we had a Doug Mastriano as governor? How bad would things have gotten if Lou Barletta were our governor? Because Barletta and Mastriano are the two front runners to be the Republican nominee in 2022. Both, I think, are bad on policy, but both, I think, are really bad on actually leadership. Remember, Mastriano was the guy who was in D.C. on January 6th, encouraging the people who attacked our Capitol. But in some parts of our Commonwealth, he's going to wear that as a badge of honor. Because, again, back to this, what we've done with media in this country. There's a rewrite of what happened on January 6th. And an attempt to make those people now heroes and martyrs. And they are neither. They are anything but. Now, I look at our former president, who on a Saturday claimed that the entire database of Maricopa County, all of it, he claims it's all been deleted. He says it's illegal, and the Arizona State Senate, who is leading the forensic audit, is up in arms. Now, the person who's in charge of Maricopa County, the Maricopa County recorder, a guy named Stephen Richer, a Republican, he tweeted out, it's plain as day, a lie. He said, we can't indulge in these insane lies any longer as a party, as a state, as a country. And interestingly enough, this is where the Republican Party has taken their marching orders from a guy who clearly is lying to them. In that CBS YouGov poll, 33% of the Republicans polled said that yes, Joe Biden was the legitimate winner of the 2020 presidential election. 33%. That means 67%, 2/3, do not believe Biden won and is the legitimate president. That is scary, frightening, but not surprising, because they've got in their ear constantly how there are all this fraud and all of this manipulation and bamboo fibers, all this craziness. And I had the opportunity to talk to a guy who kind of gave me this pitch. And I just asked the simple question of, in which court of law did they make these arguments? What court of law did Rudy Giuliani put his hand on the Bible and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God? Which one did he do it? What about Sidney Powell? What about Lynn Wood? What about the rest of the crazies who were out there, saying it was stolen? We know it was stolen. How many of them went into a court of law and presented the kind of insanity that they threw out in kangaroo courts, like they did here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and did all across the country, how many of them went into a court of law? And the answer is none. None of those allegations were made in a court of law under oath because they know they would be lying. They know it would have been perjury. They know that it would have gone to jail. It's not true. It didn't happen. But you need it to keep people riled up. Again, I go back to we've never had information so readily available, and never have we been so badly misinformed. I literally know people who said that the Chinese were stuffing ballots. That in Philadelphia, evidently, they were paying people to mark up ballots and write people's names out. And you go, a conspiracy that size is impossible. Impossible to keep quiet. And it goes back to something my grandfather always said. He said, if you're messing up, he used a different word, but he said, if you're messing up, make sure that you're the only one who knows it. Then you've only got about a 50% chance of getting ratted out because you're only going to half the time tell on yourself. You tell somebody else, it is certain. There's no way these things happened because people would be singing. People would be writing books. They'd be going on TV. Didn't happen. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The fuel still has to travel through the supply chain before once again reaching the gas pumps.
Colonial Pipeline restarts operation days after major cyber attack.
Drivers along the East Coast have turned fears of a fuel crisis into an actual one.
Out of gas because panic buying led to shortages. Biden administration greenlights nation's first major offshore wind farm. Plus,
Elon Musk sent the cryptocurrency on a roller coaster ride over the past few days.
Tesla ditches Bitcoin due to massive carbon footprint.
All of those crypto stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Chaos at the pumps tonight.
This is worse than a hurricane.
No, it is not worse than a hurricane. What is wrong with this country? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Let's start hoarding gasoline just because we can, I guess.
No, let's
What?
not.
No?
Huge sighs of relief among officials and consumers after the corporate owner of the massive Colonial Pipeline began to resume operations on Wednesday, ending a 5-day shutdown following a massive ransomware cyber attack. As we go to air, there is no word yet on whether the company paid the ransom.
Oh, they paid.
The pipeline supplies 45% of fuel for the East Coast. The company says it will take several days until fuel deliveries return to normal.
Correction, this just in. The company is saying they didn't pay.
It's important to note that there was no actual gasoline shortage on the East Coast.
But they paid.
That's according to government officials and energy analysts. But panic buying and hoarding of gasoline by consumers caused a shortage. Reportedly, thousands of gas stations in the Southeast ran out of fuel by Wednesday. Reports of panicked consumers using unsafe methods to hoard gas forced the U.S. Product Safety Commission to issue a statement warning, quote, "Do not fill plastic bags with gasoline."
Plastic bags? They were putting gasoline in plastic bags?
Reportedly.
What is wrong with this country?
Gas Buddy's Patrick DeHaan on CNN warned that hoarding is dangerous and actually impacts public safety.
People run out and hoard. That's going to mean less fuel for people that very much need it. Thinking first responders, frontline workers who need to get to work. because once it's out, it's out.
But the pipeline cyber attack and the ensuing panic paid off great for oil producers. Oil and gas prices shot up because of the Colonial Pipeline ransomware hack.
The more they fail, the more money they make. Go figure.
In other news, out in the Pacific Ocean, Tropical Storm Andres set a new record for the earliest date in the year for a storm to form.
Showing this is May.
Yes.
We're having a hurricane form now?
In the Pacific. It's showing up before the official start of the Pacific cyclone season, which begins on May 15th. Andres broke the previous earliest storm record that was set in 2017. Tesla CEO Elon Musk roiled markets for Bitcoin this week when he announced on Twitter that Tesla will stop accepting Bitcoin as payment for its electric cars, citing the vast and relentlessly increasing use of fossil fuels, especially coal, to provide energy for Bitcoin mining and transactions.
About time. I know that a lot of people have been criticizing him for that for quite a while. Glad he is not doing that anymore.
Bitcoin relies on computers to exist, and the growing value of Bitcoin is directly tied to the amount of energy it uses. Because of Bitcoin miners, several coal plants around the U.S. and the world that would have otherwise closed were pressed back into service to mine Bitcoin. Some more good news. The Biden administration has approved a new utility-scale solar energy project on public lands in the California desert. It will be located in an area designated under the Obama-era Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, which minimizes impacts on plant and animal species and tribal and recreational stakeholders.
Nice.
And the Biden administration has given the final go-ahead for the nation's first major offshore wind farm, issuing final permits for the Vineyard Wind project off the coast of Massachusetts after it was canceled by the Trump administration. The 800-megawatt wind farm will power 400,000 homes. However, Vineyard Wind's CEO says that since the U.S. currently lacks a wind energy supply chain, manufacturing of some of the project's components must be outside of the U.S. But he hopes that the approval will spur investment in more U.S. manufacturing.
There's an idea.
It's a first step in catching up to Europe, the global leader in offshore wind. Europe installed the equivalent of 3 Vineyard Wind projects in 2020 alone.
Because Europe is better than us. What is wrong with this country? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interestingly enough, Liz Cheney, who was canceled from her position as chair of the House Republican Conference, evidently told Jonathan Karl on Sunday that she regrets voting for the former guy in 2020 and said that, she's not going to say if she's going to leave the GOP if Trump is the nominee in 2024. Interestingly enough, Franklin Graham said he doesn't think the former guy should because he's going to be too old. I'm sure that's not going to go over well with the former guy. Just waiting for his blog to rant on that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. What do you say to Franklin Graham if you're Donald Trump? A few things are going through my mind. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why Franklin Graham just hasn't holed away after all of the scandal and all of the stuff around him. I don't know why someone interviewed him, but he came out said he doesn't think he should run.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Liz Cheney, I just don't. She's not going to switch to the Democratic side. Also, I think, and don't get me wrong, when I got into Congress, Rick, in 1995, we had several switches, right?
Right.
And some of the Democratic members that switched, they got grief no matter what for the entire time. And then some of them were accepted, and people said, well, they don't have the seniority. How come you're advancing them like Billy Tozan? was advanced, and it was because they wanted to keep them there and show other Democrats, if you switch, you get treated well. I just don't see that whole scenario with a Cheney in the Democratic side. I don't see it.
Yeah. Speaking of someone who flipped, went from a Democrat to a Republican, former Louisiana Governor Buddy Roemer, who passed away today.
Yes. Yeah, Buddy Roemer.
Did you know him?
No, did not know him. Knew of him, of course, but did not know him.
Yeah. I figured you know everybody. I mean, he was...
Well, I do know a lot, but I know a couple other people from Louisiana. Mayor Nagin, Maxine Waters, and I had a hearing that he got very, very angry at us. So I do know him. Very angry.
Not in a good way. I wonder if he's out of jail yet.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't either. Speaking of going to jail, today the big news, obviously, Joel Greenberg pled guilty six counts, including sex trafficking. I mean, that's a pretty big one. He was, I guess, 35 counts, felonies he was up for. He pled guilty to 6.
Right, sex trafficking with a minor.
Yeah,
too, which is big. Not just sex trafficking, but with a minor.
Yeah, that's a bit. That's a big one.
Which is the issue behind the congressman.
So now Matt Gaetz, I didn't see him mention anything today on his Twitter account, but kind of quiet. Kind of quiet down now.
Well, usually the department will, go in this process where they do the deals, and then they get to the other people they want. They do that, of course. And so I assume that this is the precursor, and then they might have gotten other information from him after they did the deal with him. He might have told them other things about the congressman, possibly because he got his deal.
Yeah.
And then they will bring in other people, and it multiplies to where they were interviewing 10 or 15 people associated with the case. Maybe now it'll be 25, and it puts a lot of heat at the top of the food chain where they want to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, the story came out, a very salacious story that evidently was sniffing cocaine off the backside of a hooker who actually had a no-show government job.
And see, they say Republicans don't have, aren't really, they're too uptight, right? Huh? Let's look at the positive side of this. I mean, they're partiers. In all seriousness, though, he also showed pictures to members on the floor of the women.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, he did. Members, I think, have confirmed that. Republican members, he had done that.
Now, what's the process of getting him ousted? I mean, I keep saying that the Democrats should not lift a finger. They shouldn't have done anything to Marjorie Taylor Greene. They should do nothing to Matt Gaetz. This is a Republican problem. Let's say he is indicted. Let's say he is, he's arrested. What's the process?
Well, here, until you are actually, because I ran up against this with John Boehner, until you are convicted by a jury, or if you do a plea deal, even if you do the plea deal, you are not official until you're sentenced. So they really can't do anything except, scream that you need to leave.
Right.
They really can't do anything. So let's say Gaetz does a plea deal, and he does it, let's say, in July, but he's not sentenced until September. He can technically remain until September.
And if they draw this out, he might be able to finish out his term.
Well, possibly. I mean, court battles, in my case, frankly, if I'd have had $3.2 million, it would have probably went on for 2 or 3 years. They could take a long time. But until he either is convicted by a jury or sentenced, then they really can't do much.
Now, to be clear, your problem was you didn't put a couple of $1,000s down on an expense report. Right.
Well, yeah, the expense report, which is my fault, was filled out by a staff person. I signed it, which we told the government. In all the trips I ever took, the military filled out everything, or a staffer filled out, and I never, ever, ever filled them out myself. It's not in my handwriting, but that's frankly irrelevant. Yes, what I signed I think it lowballed the trip by probably $7,000, I think, or $8,000 some dollars.
Yeah, so you weren't sniffing coke off of a hooker.
No, I was more mild. I mean, I was with Abramoff in Scotland, but yeah. Most exciting it got is I saw the Queen and Prince Charles and Camille, and that was it.
Look at that.
Yeah.
So today is tax day. You got all your tax stuff squirreled away?
I am extended. I'm on the extension plan, so I've got an extension on my taxes.
No, so you're one of those millionaire guys who.
No, I am one of those procrastinating guys. I think my accountant's furious with me. It's not like I have a whole complicated system. No, I do flip houses, as you know, so they have to put together my LLC.
Right.
And I just did not get them the information in time. They think they'll be done in about a week from now. So I just got an extension.
Yeah. Well, so today Biden had his big spiel. We're pushing for the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit. There's some money coming out for people with kids. I guess starting July 15th.
Right.
If you got a kid, $250 per kid. $300 for kids
under 5
and under.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing, bad thing? Your thoughts?
I think it's okay. I think in the planning process, the Congress shouldn't go too far with these in the sense of don't pass legislation where it goes out a full year. I would take it 6 months, but they're not going to do that in most cases because I think they fear the whole arguments when you bring things up again and it's going to be argued. I'm just saying for the fiscal side of it, I think it would be better if they just did it for 6 months at a time and then reevaluate it. But I think the idea is good. I mean, this is going to help balance through the rest of the pandemic, and we'll see if there's recovery. We've hit 60% on the vaccinations. The president's pushing in July for our quote herd immunity number, and so I think it's going to obviously give a shot in the arm to a lot of people.
No, I mean it's something that I think we need, and I had a guest earlier, Morris Pearl from Patriotic Millionaires, who said don't complain about people at the bottom getting a couple of bucks. We give corporations enormous amounts of money,
Sure.
In the hopes that they'll create jobs, and instead of just giving it to working people who we know are going to spend it and going to create jobs. This to me is not a bad thing.
Well, and we had a unique thing that happened here. If this had been proposed with no pandemic to just start now, daycare, sure, that's been around a while. But in general, if this had been proposed and there was no pandemic, it wouldn't have went anywhere. But we had a pandemic, we had a problem. The country was in horrific condition, and so this helped people to at least manage through things, and this is going to help them in months to come to manage through. And also, it's kind of important, too, because some of the states are cutting back on the, as you know, on the unemployment. If you don't have children, you don't get that, but obviously the people with kids need some relief.
Yeah, and look, after being basically doing teacher duty for an extra year.
Yes.
A little help isn't a bad thing.
A little bonus for it.
A little bonus.
Right.
A little help for mama, which is not a bad thing. Also, good news today. President Biden announced that we're going to be exporting 20 million doses of the vaccine. That doesn't sound like a lot when you look at a place like India, who's really struggling.
Yes, we're going to have to do more, and I understand the hesitation, of the White House to have just, a month ago sent vaccine all around the world. We're loosening up now. They try to take care of, the home front here, the homeland, and then after that, they'll start to ship. And they will ship more. There will be more shipped. But he had to do it. If he had done this a few months ago, and I know there's a good of the cause deal for the world, but if you don't get your own country stabilized, we're not going to be in very good condition to help others. So now's the time to do it. And I really think if he gets criticized, it's going to be so minor and so petty.
Yeah. It's like they tell you when you get on an airplane, make sure you put your mask on first. Then you help somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, true. That's a good point.
You're no good to us if you're not awake.
True.
Also, the Supreme Court today.
Yes.
Big news coming out of the Supreme Court. Is this the end of Roe, do you think?
Well, now, it's a great question. This is looking at the Mississippi 15-week, you can't get an abortion law. And so it's an aspect of Roe versus Wade after 15 weeks. I'm going to be very, very, as the whole country is, interested to see what they do. I don't know. You can't really predict the court anymore. They didn't jump to the Trump cause, So I don't know what they'll do with the Mississippi law.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. First foremost, I'm seeing 3-3 easy. It's the other three that actually 4-4 probably easy. Roberts, I think, is on the side with Kagan and Breyer and Sotomayor. I think the swing. Who do you see as the swing? I mean, is Kavanaugh the swing in this, or is it Gorsuch?
I was just going to say Kavanaugh because I was quite shocked when Kavanaugh, was at his hearing of his statements of the law of the land, Roe v. Wade. I was surprised. So I think he is the one that potentially, is going to make the call.
Going to be interesting to see because it doesn't outright ban it, but it makes it almost, good luck.
It's very tough after 15 weeks if they follow that.
Now, the Biden administration has said that they were going to go to a legislative path. Is it possible to legislate this? Because could this be what we undo the filibuster for?
Now, that's interesting. I mean, it could. That's very interesting. See if they would do that.
I mean, because the argument, and I've had this discussion with a couple of people recently who enlightened me to the idea that the things Republicans pursue, like court appointments, tax cuts, aren't subject to the filibuster. So what priority would they pursue if they had the opportunity to just pass anything they wanted? Would they go after something big? And my response was immediately Social Security. They'd privatize it the next day. But outside of that, I don't know. Thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, Social Security. That question has got me stumbled. I don't know which direction they would go.
Because I have a lot of people say, no, we can't do anything with the filibuster because once Republicans get it, and they will, then bad things will happen. And I agree. Social Security privatization would be a horrible thing because you can't undo that.
Right. But then again, I don't know. I'm being a creature of politics. I think you undo the filibuster, and then everybody work really, really hard to get your candidates in there.
Yeah.
And instead of being 50-50, make it 53, 54.
I'm right there with you. That to me,
right.
Things got to get done. You got to get things done.
Right.
And
exactly.
if someone takes over and does something bad, you throw the bums out. You put somebody else in. To fix it.
Right.
Pretty simple. And finally, wanted to get your thoughts on Space Force. Evidently, the commander of Space Force, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer, evidently he has been relieved of command because he said that the military is being filled with people with Marxist ideology.
Yeah, well, I don't think he had quite a future anyway with the whole Space Force. I'm not sure where that whole deal goes anyway, Rick. With Space Force.
He's not going to be Luke Skywalker. We're not going to have Star Wars. That's not coming.
No. The reaction, to what he said is natural. I mean, you're not going to get back to McCarthyism. Nobody wants that.
Right. No, you're right.
Which one?
But I was a big fan of the game Galaga. I was hoping at some point.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
It was my favorite game.
Oh yeah, I like when you get the two of them and then you can shoot at the same time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I hate when they capture you and you kill it and then you lose both. That's
exactly
terrible. See, we could both be commanders of Space Force.
Wow, I still play it on my cell phone. I'm terrible. Carol's laughing at both of us.
Well, yeah, I've got the same. I've got the game. I don't have Galaga. I've got Galaxia or something.
Right.
Because I don't think the actual Galaga is on my phone. But there you go. A little insight into our friend Bob Ney.
There you go.
But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks.
Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. That was the best part of the whole interview. We both like Galaga. Right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down their decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In the unanimous decision, the court declared that racial segregation in public education was illegal. The case was filed for Linda Brown, a student who had been denied enrollment in her local elementary school because she was black. The court's decision overturned the concept of separate but equal. This legal basis for discrimination and segregation had been established by the Supreme Court earlier in their 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision. The Brown decision overturned nearly 6 decades of legally sanctioned racism. The American Federation of Teachers filed an amicus brief or friend of the court brief in support of the Brown family. The union's motion stated, quote, "The American Federation of Teachers, whose 60,000 classroom teacher members represent the group which does the actual work of teaching the nation's children, is committed to a practice of complete equality between teachers and children of every race. This principle is written indelibly in its Constitution and bylaws." In addition, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City also filed a brief with the court in support of Brown. Even after the court's decision, school desegregation did not come easy. Mobs of angry white Southerners showed up at schools to protest the admission of black students. In 1957, the National Guard had to protect 9 black students attempting to enroll in school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The United Teachers Union led the American Federation of Teachers to expel Southern Union locals that refused to abide by the desegregation decision. The Brown decision helped to launch the civil rights movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, one of the Capitol rioters, they released him out of jail. Gave him some time out of jail. Said, "Okay, you can go till your trial." He was allowed to return to Colorado after he kicked the cop. After he stormed the Capitol. Now federal prosecutors are saying, nope, it's time for us to revoke his release, put him back in jail after he... how stupid can you get? I mean, these are, again, people who literally videotape their own treason. They literally put on social media all of their crimes. So am I surprised that he goes and he kills a 170-pound mountain lion and puts it on social media after they have prohibited him from having a gun? I am not surprised at all. And as the prosecutors have pursued, they said, given that Mr. Montgomery has repeatedly and flagrantly violated both state and federal law while on pretrial release in this case, including by possessing and using a firearm, the government respectfully requests that the court revoke his release pending trial. That means he could spend the better part of the next year sitting in jail waiting for his trial. Now, what's funny, he wrote on his Facebook page that he's not a scaredy cat or running from anything. He's just a guy who stormed the Capitol. Or as the congressman from Georgia, he was just a guy who was, walking between the ropes. He was like any other day. Any other day at the Capitol, he was just taking a tour. Wanted to go lobby as congressperson.
just good, upstanding, good God-fearing Christian guy who gave the cops, a good kick in the chest before giving them the double middle finger. Yeah, just a good God-fearing guy. Yeah, and it wasn't the gun. It wasn't the gun that killed the lion. It was the lion who killed himself. He just dropped dead right in front of him. It wasn't his fault. He didn't mean it. He tripped over him. Anyway, it'll be fun to see how long he sits in jail because he has been charged with 10 counts, and state authorities are investigating him for illegally killing a bobcat. So good, upstanding citizen. I hope he spends a lot of time in jail. That's simple. And I'm sure it'd be very popular. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, Election Day tomorrow. Get out and vote. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.